The Rock and Roll Coffee Show is brought to you by Writers and Rockers Coffee Company, keeping the music and memories alive with some damn good coffee. Visit them at writersandrockerscoffee.com. And Retroactive, located at Broadway at the Beach in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. 70s, 80s, 90s retro. ShopRetroactive.com. Hey, and welcome back to the Rock and Roll Coffee Show. I am Joe Sibilia. Thanks for tuning in. My next guest is Dr. Steve Olivas. Now, Steve is not only a psychologist, but he is also the host of The Commute, Wrong and Wronger, and 10 Minutes to Save Your Marriage podcasts. I definitely recommend you check those podcasts out. The Commute you can find on all streaming platforms. Wrong and Wronger you can find here on YouTube. Steve also recently purchased some land, so if you follow Steve on social media, you've seen all the little friends that he's met while he's out there. He calls it Rattlesnake Ranch for a reason, and I had to ask him about that. Now, Steve is also an author and has been writing autobiographies with Cher Ross from Vixen, most recently Ron Young of Little Caesar, which should be out by Christmas, and he's working on one with Pete Evick from the Bret Michaels Band, which I'm really looking forward to. I want to talk to Steve about all this and more next.
It's the Rock and Roll Coffee Show, yeah we do.
Are you at the ranch right now?
Yeah.
Now, I got to ask you about the ranch because you've posted a lot of stuff about it since you bought it. If anybody that follows you on social media would see your, what you post about the ranch. And you named it Rattlesnake Ranch for a reason.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind, all the stuff that you've been posting. What did you know that going into that place that's how it was, all those snakes?
All those snakes might be a little overstated because whenever I see one, I post it. So we've only seen 4 of them. But I will say the very first day we were on the property with our realtor, there was a rattlesnake curled up next to the small cabin, and it was a timber rattler.
I am not a snake guy at all. I think I would have left right away. Was there any, what did the wife say?
It's interesting. Are we recording now, Joe? Are we on?
Oh, yeah, we're going.
Oh, okay. No, I like interesting things, and that's why I do my show, because I'm interested in what people do for a living. But we've got deers and armadillos, and I say deers on purpose because it drives my aunts crazy. But we've got snakes and we've got coyotes, and I like it. I find it to be a challenge, but also entertaining to just get to know the animals and their rhythms and what they do and how they do it. And all of the deer have different personalities. And right now we're in something called the rut, which means it's banging time for the deer. No. So the bucks are all out chasing the does around, and the does are running away and trying to figure out which buck is worthy of her. And it's interesting. So yeah, the snakes are just part of what, in a twisted way, I find to be charming about the property.
Really? You haven't had any in the cabin yet, I hope.
Nope, not yet. They're pretty timid. I don't think they would come into the cabin. We've had one kind of close. It was up by the garage, and that's about as close as they've come. There is a place where we've seen most of them in the same place, so I kind of know where most of them hang out.
So you stay away from that area?
No, not at all.
You go there more.
We keep the boots on when we're around there. When the grass gets too high, it gets a little more dangerous, but we keep the grass mowed on purpose to keep the snakes back. And that also keeps the field mice back. So that's the snake's food source. So they, with the mice back in the woods, the snakes stay back in the woods.
Yeah. Man, you're a brave man.
Yes, but that's completely unrelated, Joe.
Oh, man. So, okay, so you are still in Tennessee, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you have a lot of property now. So have you always wanted to have something like that and get away from the neighborhoods, or what led you out there?
No, we wanted to get out of a mortgage. So we wanted to sell our house and then pay cash for something. And we wanted a little bit of land. And then, and you know how it is, man, you go looking for a car and you think I can spend 15 grand.
Yeah.
And then you see one for 19 and you're like, all right, we can do 19. And then you see one for 24 and you're like, well, that's not that much different from 19.
Yeah.
Anyway, by the time all is said and done, you've bought a $32,000 new car with all the bells and whistles that you've ever wanted. So we started off just looking for a gentleman's farm, like 5 acres somewhere out in the country. We did want to get away from the city. And then I put a deposit down on a 25-acre parcel of land that didn't have any dwellings on it. And we kept looking. We were able to hold that for a month with the deposit. And then we, I don't even know if I remember how we happened upon this place, but we've kept track, and literally every person that has come up the driveway has made a comment on how incredible the land and the landscape is.
Yeah.
And the first time we came up the driveway with our realtor, I remember, I don't know if I can swear on your show, Joe, or not, but we got out of the car, he got out of his truck, and I went, holy, and his two little girls were in the back seat, and I felt so bad about that. But man, it's just it's quite spectacular here. So we
Yeah.
didn't start off looking for this big of a chunk, but when we saw this place, it's been a wreck and a disaster to try to rebuild. We figure it's about a 2 year project, and we're a year in, so
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
going slow, but it's gratifying because with
Sure.
everything we reclaim from the earth, the guy who owned it before us went to prison 3 years ago, and everything went fallow. Like he still had food on the table when the marshals came and got him.
Oh man.
So we had to rip everything out of the cabin. This is not rock, roll, or coffee, but this
That's
is
okay.
like all the cabinets had to get ripped out because there were mice living in here for 3 years. There were all of the weeds were chest high. Like we've had to reclaim all of that earth and get some of the trees pared back. So
Yeah.
between trying to rebuild the cabins and trying to get the land back in shape, it's been a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. I mean, I've enjoyed watching the process from what I've seen.
Well, thank you, Joe. I
Yeah, it's
appreciate you watching.
looking good out there, man. So let's talk a little bit about now I wanted to have you on the show because I found The Commute, which is your podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and really enjoyed it. You're very entertaining. I think your show. I love the way you talk to people with interesting jobs, and then but you also talk to the rock stars.
I did during COVID. Neither them nor me had anything to do. So it made it, and you know this too, because I
Hmm.
bet you tapped into the advantage that we had also.
Sure.
I've seen your list of guests is actually more impressive than mine. You have some guests that I think, how the hell did he get that guy? Like, I've been trying to get that guy, and he's been on Sebelia's show. But
Damn it.
I know. And he's got the tats that I don't have. That's what
That
makes
might be
Joe
it.
so
Yeah.
much more attractive. But I did Music Monday, so I did a rock star from. You're, I think you're a couple years older than I am, Joe. So we're from the same era. So I've had every Monday for almost 2 years. I had a rock star on Monday, and then a person with a normal, interesting job on Thursday. The rock stars have petered out, not only because they've been on the road, but also because I just haven't had time to pursue them.
Sure.
It takes a lot of work. I don't think people realize how much work you put into getting this show produced every week,
Right.
because you've got to get in touch with the musicians. You've got to get them to talk back to you, and then once that's made, then you've got to schedule and you've got to get it mastered and record. Like, there's a lot that goes into producing one of these every week. So my hat's off to you for the amount of work you've put in and the network you've created just to be able to
Thanks, man.
get a consistent stream of really good guests.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Like you said, it is a lot of work. Um, but how do you find, like the rock stars is one thing, finding them. I mean, but how do you find all these people with these interesting jobs? That seems
Just
like it'd be a little more
happenstance.
difficult.
Well, I've been doing the show for over 6 years now, so I've got sort of a pattern that I fall into with people, and it's literally people I meet at the airport. Like I'm a talker, like I'm sure you
Yeah.
probably are. So if you're a talker, it doesn't take much to get into a conversation with someone, and invariably, especially among dudes, like "What do you do for a living?" is a very standard question that comes up, right? And
Sure.
if it's something interesting, I'll just invite them on the show, and I probably bat a little north of 50-50 with getting people to say, yeah, that'll be
Yeah.
interesting. So it's people I know, people from my home in Wisconsin, people I know from around here in town, people I know on social media. You've got a good following. And if you just kind of scroll through the bios, people a lot of times will put what they do for a living. And I think some of them are pretty cool. Other times I'll put a call out and say, what did I just get recently? Man, I can't remember. I'm feeling under the gun here, but I'll
Yeah, no worries.
say, like, hey, does anybody know someone who works on a road crew? Like, I'm curious, how do you do a freeway? Like,
I
how do you do
see.
a highway? Like, I'm just curious about that stuff. And someone will know someone who knows someone, and they're like, hey, talk to this guy. And then I'll reach out to that guy. And sometimes, most of the time, they'll say, yeah. They always say, what I do is boring. And I always say back, everybody says that. They're always wrong.
Right, right. Well, right, because I mean, whatever you do, you've done it for so long, or it's just second nature to you, so it seems boring.
I've got coyotes howling outside my window.
Do
I
you?
don't know if the mics are going to pick it up. I cracked the window open here, but
Yeah. Hopefully, we'll get some. I don't hear them, but hopefully, we'll get
no, they're pretty active right now.
them.
I don't know when coyotes mate, like if they have a season or if they're like humans, they just do it when they're in the
Right,
mood.
right.
But they're out and they're yipping tonight.
That's awesome. Well, stay safe out there.
Do people really mean it when they say that, Joe? Do they care one way or the other,
Dude,
or is that just a
I do.
virtue
I do
signal?
care about you, Steve. I do care. I
Do
don't want to
you?
see coyotes take over the cabin. So.
Well, and the speaking of, and I know you said you're talking about the rock stars and how we sort of blaze a trail to get to. And once you get a few, it's easier to get the next few. So
Mm,
I remember the first one I got, and I'm sure you've had him on several times. I've had him on three times because he's a talker too. But Ace Von Johnson from
yep.
at the time Faster Pussycat and
Right.
now L.A. Guns and Neon Coven. But he was my first one. Actually, my
Was he?
first one was a guy from Saigon Kick, just because I know him personally, and he did me a favor to come on the show. But the when I got Ace Von Johnson, I was able to kind of parlay that into, hey, I got this guy. How about you? And then it just
Hmm.
kind of snowballed from there. And when COVID hit too, I made most of my living as a public speaker. So I'd go all over the US and Canada doing talks, and that came to a screeching halt. I tell people
Mm.
it hit the brakes so fast, I almost went through the windshield, and I needed another revenue stream. And so, because I live in Nashville, so many of these guys from our era, Joe, live in Nashville and the
Right.
surrounding areas. So I've become like friends. Like Ace and I, we've gone out to lunch several times. Like we had a monthly meeting for a while where we go out and complain about the kids nowadays, which he is one. But I was friends with Tesla's drummer, Troy Lucetta.
Troy. Yeah.
And he's been on your show, I've seen
Yep.
too. But I
Hmm.
called him and I said, hey, you ever think about writing an autobiography? And he said, yeah, I'm actually in talks with a guy right now, and he wants X number of dollars. And I said, well, talk to me about it because I'm local and we can get together. And you know me, like I was at a 4th of July party at his house. We were introduced through a mutual friend. So I don't want
Okay.
to make this seem like I'm an impressive musician like you, Joe. Talk about that too in a little bit. But over time, Troy kind of, I sort of won the contract, if that makes
Sure.
sense. And he came to my office for 2 hour chunks over the course of a month or two, and we got the book hammered out. And then things started going sideways with Tesla. And he said, we got to hold off on this book.
Uh-oh.
And I want to make sure that I clear all of what's happening with Tesla because I'm going to do some rewrites and tell the truth this time.
Mm.
So, but that book, again, it's just like doing the show. That book led to another, led to another, led to another. And I'm on book number, well, I've done 8 of them now, ghostwriting autobiographies with rock stars. And I've got a ninth one lined up. And there's 3 guys that are kind of hovering that said, yeah, I want to do it, but not yet. One is in a lawsuit with his former band. So that'll be an interesting one.
Yeah.
And, but that's been a really cool, complete left turn that I didn't expect and just getting to know the inside of these guys' lives and the music industry and everything that goes into being successful and then being not or being successful and then dropping down a notch and trying to
Hmm.
keep legging it out and make a little money, scratch by a living for the rest of your life. A lot of these guys are in their 60s now,
Yeah.
and they're still scraping it out, getting out there on the road and killing it.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Because I was going to ask you about the writing and stuff, and that's perfect that you just said how you got into it. Now, when you get somebody that's going to do a book, I mean, what is that process? You just sit and just talk to them and ask them questions and record it? I mean, how does it work to get that information out of them and then onto paper?
You know, you and I were talking before we hit record here about how both of us have the same style when we
Mm.
interview somebody, which is it's not an interview, it's a
Right, right.
conversation. And so most of them have said, so what do we do? Like, you ask me questions, okay? And I literally, Joe, with every single one of them, I ask one question on minute one of day one, and everything else is just them talking. Because once you shake a branch, every story that's associated with that branch starts popping into their head like popcorn. And I'll just ask them, like, tell me about your earliest memory. What was it like growing up? And they are off to the races. And the way they think tends to be chronological because one thing leads to another. So yeah, I grew up then in high school. I had this band, and then these guys left, and I was looking for a band. Then I moved to LA, and all of this. And they tell me, and once in a while they'll have to circle back and say, "I forgot to tell you about this guy," and then we'll patch that in. But
Hmm.
yes, to answer your question directly, the nuts and bolts of it, the mechanics are. Uh, if they're in town, they'll come into my office and we'll have a face to face, and I record everything.
Right.
And then I just go back and I write 2,000 words a day, which is about 5 pages.
That's your
And
goal.
the average book is 80,000 words. Some have been north of that by a little bit. So I can write a book in about a month and a half if I keep getting
Wow.
content from them.
Right. So I guess that's up to them though to provide that content and continue it to get
They
enough
have two
information.
roles, and I hate when things are out of my control because when I'm assigned something, it gets done quickly and accurately. And when I push it to someone else and say, I need you to do this before I can do that, it languishes. And it's like, God, will you just do your part? And so, yeah, so the rock star, their job is one, just provide me that content. And listen, everybody's busy. I understand. So if
Yeah.
they're on the road or something, they want to be focused on what they're doing. But I just need those phone calls. Can we do 1 hour? Can we do a half hour? After I get the manuscript hammered out, what they have to do then, and this gets hard for interesting reasons, but they have to go through it, read the whole manuscript, and do a content edit. Yeah, this is going to hurt that person's feelings. Take it out. That kind of
Hmm.
thing. Or, nah, you got this wrong. I wasn't in Cleveland that night. I was in Philadelphia. Like those kinds of things.
Hmm.
But man, I don't know how much a lot of these folks read, Joe, but it seems to be a daunting task that they want to put off as long as possible. That's always the part where everything stalls.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet. I bet. That's amazing. Have you always wanted to be a writer?
Yeah. I've
Yeah.
written 4 novels, and I've written for the newspaper here in town a couple of different times. So I have a knack for it, and it's interesting to me, and it's something I can do on my own time. So I
Hmm.
get up at I get up at either 1 a.m. or 3 a.m. to do 2 hours of writing. And then I can shower and go into my regular job. But I like
Right.
doing it in the middle of the night when it's dark and everything is quiet. Everyone's in bed. The coyotes aren't yipping. Like I'm one of the night breed.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, Steve's up. We're out of here.
Yeah, that crazy dude. Yeah.
um, okay. So your day job, you mentioned your day job. So you're a psychologist, correct? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
I'm a shrink.
A shrink. Okay. So, and is
Which,
that,
by the way, I didn't mean to cut you off,
yeah,
Joe.
yeah,
I'll get
yeah.
to it, but that also, in a weird way, that helps sell me as a writer to the artists because for a lot of them, they're like, "Yeah, I got all this crap in my head. I'll bet you can make sense of it." Or it can be therapeutic. It really can be therapeutic for them to talk through some of this stuff because when for example, the book that we'll have out for Christmas is by Ron. Have you had Ron Young on your
I've
show
not
from
had
Little
Ron on.
Caesar?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
He's a talker too. You got to get him on the
Does he?
show.
Okay.
But his book is coming out, and Little Caesar got screwed so hard by, and Ron Young specifically, by David Geffen. That story is phenomenal, and it's in the book. But the point I'm trying to make is for a lot of these folks, when grunge hit, like their career hit a brick wall, and it was kind of traumatic for them because they were sort of launched into this. I don't know what I'm going to do to stay solvent, to keep making
Mm,
money, to do what I love to do. And it's like when an athlete retires, like for a lot of these guys, and I've had Cher Ross from Vixen, I've written her book too, and I'm in the process of writing one with Britt Lightning. But Britt is too young. She's of the newer generation. But Cher and Vixen, but what was I about to say? Oh, guys and gals. The point is that for a lot of them, there was some trauma involved that they've never really worked through. And some of them have drug
interesting.
issues. Wrote a book with Brian Forsyth from Kicks talking about his heroin addiction. Troy Lucetta's had a cocaine addiction. Ron Young, bad tar heroin addiction. And just kind of talking through that with another person. It's sort of like going to confession a little bit. It feels
Sure.
very intimate, even though it's in the book. But so that I know I've come all the way around the block to get to the neighbor's house here, but me being a psychologist, I think is attractive to a lot of them to just be able to talk about this stuff with somebody, some of the stuff they've never talked about with anybody before. And I consider that quite an honor.
That's awesome. Do you have to pry information out of some of them, or
No,
no?
I'll ask follow-up questions like
Mhm.
if they tell me something and they're sort of glossing over it. I listen like a fan, and because I am a fan of
Yeah,
all
because
of
you are a
these
fan.
folks,
Yeah.
and I it's so surreal, Joe. And I know you've been in the business and you've been at a high level. Like you knew Brian Johnson when you were a freaking kid, man, from ACDC. So to you, this is like a no-brainer. But to me, these are the people I admired when I was in my teens and 20s. Like I went and saw these people on stage and they were heroes to me, like
Hmm.
rock gods, right? And so for me, it's so just surreal to have the inside track and to ask questions like a fan because I am curious about this stuff. What
Yeah.
happened when you were backstage with Gene Simmons? And then they'll blow through the story, and I'll be like, no, 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 wait. What happened?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we'll kind of go back and flesh it out a little bit.
Okay. Okay. Talk about let's get back to your becoming a psychologist a little bit. Now, when you were a kid, you grew up in, I want to say it was Wisconsin.
You pronounce it like someone who's not from there, but
I am not.
yes.
How is it pronounced?
You said Wisconsin, like
Wisconsin.
Wesley.
Yeah, yeah.
It's Wisconsin, and if you're from there, you need a little more nasal. Wisconsin. And
Like the
Milwaukee has a W in it. Milwaukee.
interesting. So anyway, back to growing up there.
Yeah. We'll
um,
edit that in post, Joe.
so you grew up there, and how did you, were your parents into psychology, or I mean, how did you find your interest in that? Because I used to be a psych tech when I was in college, a psychiatric technician, and
Oh,
and
that's not a fun job.
well, it was fun. I mean, back then when you're in your early 20s, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking to all the people. I mean, there's stories. I'm sure you know the stories that I could tell right now, but um, I mean, how did you get into it? I got into it because it was a job at the time while I was going to college.
I got into it because, man, this is going to sound contrite and smug, but I'm dead serious. I got into it because I needed to get into some kind of major that a monkey with a checkbook could get through. That I'd gotten kicked out of Marquette University for reasons that I find a bit dubious at best. Me and the Jesuits, we had a little disagreement over my long-term potential as a college student. And so I was kind of lost and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I moved in with a buddy of mine at a different school, and he was a psych in the psych program. And I thought, okay, well, I suppose this is easy enough. I don't know anything about it, but what the heck? And it took, it did its job. I graduated, but you can't, as you probably know, because you worked as a psych tech, you can't get a job that pays career kind of money with a
Hmm.
bachelor's degree. So the same buddy who was in the psych program, he was a year ahead of me, and he was in the master's program of counseling. And the other thing that was happening simultaneous to that is my girlfriend at the time was a year behind me. And so I didn't want to leave town quite yet. I was waiting for her. I needed something to do. And so it was the same attitude, Joe. I figured, well, hell, anybody can get through this. How hard can this be? So I got into the counseling program. And then I got a job as a child therapist because I guess like Arrested Development. I'm the poster child. And so I started doing that. And my roommate at the time, different guy, he misread a job posting and it changed the trajectory of my life because he came home one day to our apartment and he said, "Hey, dude, there's a posting at the Department of Human Services. They're looking for a psychologist. They're going to pay 90 grand a year." And I was like, wow, this is like 1989, right?
Right.
Like 90,000 a year. I think in today's dollars, it's worth like 4.2 million. So I'm
Wow.
like, well, hell, I can get a psychologist degree. How hard can it be to get a PhD in this stuff? Like, it's not real science. So I applied all over the place, and I ended up going to the University of Oklahoma. And I remember the interview. There were like 100 people interviewing for 6 slots. And Joe, it never occurred to me that I wasn't going to get one of those slots. And I probably came off as a pompous dick to everyone else that was interviewing, but it really never occurred to me. I never failed at anything,
Yeah.
which that came later in life. Actually, I did fail. I got kicked out of Marquette. That was a dark day for me.
What
But the point
happens?
is, I got in Oklahoma and I graduated. And then years later, I realized, my roommate misread the sign. They were looking for a psychiatrist for 90 grand a year. And people, that's not a distinction
Mm-hmm.
most people understand. A psychiatrist is an MD. They can
Mm-hmm.
prescribe medication and they make a boatload of money. Psychologists are a PhD and we die poor and bitter.
But you never thought of going further?
I went as far as I could go. The
Oh, that's as far as
PhD
you
is
can
a
go?
terminal degree. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, now you have your own practice and you've had that for a long time. So that's pretty successful.
I have. And I see men. So I saw kids for a lot of years, kids and teenagers, and my partner died,
Hmm.
and he was just a kid, Joe.
Oh,
It's weird.
man.
He was 46 when he died of
Oh,
cancer,
sorry to hear
and
that.
so I thought I can't run a kid and teenager practice by myself. Like there's too many moving parts when you work with kids. So I moved offices. We were on Music Row downtown. We actually had some pretty high level country music people as clients too. It's been a strange ride for me. I'm in
Yeah.
my mid 50s now, and I think, boy, I don't think I could have predicted this when I was in my 20s.
Right.
But I started seeing all kinds of clients, and then I figured out I like seeing dudes. Like men don't like going to therapy; they don't like therapists. But I'm the guy that someone who won't talk to anybody will talk to, and that has been my bread and butter.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you're very easy to talk to. You're very
Well, you've only
pleasant.
known me for a half an hour, Joe. Come on.
And it's been a breeze.
That's because I keep cutting you off and hijacking the conversation.
No, no, it's all about you though right now. So that's good. That's
Oh,
good.
go on.
That's awesome, man. So now with the back to the podcasting, you have the commute, but you also have a few other ones. I think you have Wrong and Wronger. I was listening to some of those today. You're still doing that because I saw a new post. Um,
Yeah, in fact, there was a time there where I did 5 podcasts and a radio show every
oh
week.
man,
Yeah,
how
it got
how
to
do
be a
you do
little
that?
much. But right now I'm just doing 3 pod. Well, I did the commute twice a week, so that was 2 of them. I did Music Mondays and Normie Thursdays. But yeah, Wrong and Wronger with the Exploding Unicorn. If any of you follow him on Twitter, he's actually quite a bit more normal in real life. And then we also do one called 10 Minutes to Save Your Marriage every week, where listeners write in relationship questions. So you get a shrink, that's me, and a comedian, that's him. And we, in 10 minutes, answer people's relationship questions. And I used to do Keto Rocks with Brian Forsyth from Kicks and a guy
Hmm.
named Jim Hobbs, that they talk about the keto lifestyle and
Yeah.
carnivore diet, that kind of stuff. And then I also did a show called The Pantheon. on Guitar God Radio every week, which was basically I repackaged my interviews from the commute and then did a different intro and outro to them.
But it was the same conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I did
Okay.
some like I was a little more free to do like up and comer kind of current bands. So it wasn't just those old stodgy rockers from the 80s, Joe.
Yeah.
You know a couple of those guys.
Yeah. A few
So
of
I
them.
interviewed a few bands that are kind of on the edge doing rock and roll. There's not a lot of metal and rock being produced at like a commercial level now. It's hard to find in the US. It's hard to find bands. A lot of them are European.
Hmm. Yeah. So with us, both of us around the same age. I mean, you grew up with all the hair metal and those bands.
Those bands,
Those
yes.
bands. Yeah. Yeah. So were you a rocker yourself? I mean, did you ever play an instrument or anything?
No, my dad was in a band that had a top, I think they did top 30 back then, but they had a top 30 hit back in 1961. He was in a band called the Chevrons. So he
Okay.
was a guitar player and he went into a covers band that played weddings until probably 10 years, maybe 15 years ago, they finally hung it up. So I was around music my whole life because I would go and watch my dad play and eat free wedding cake and dance, and live music to me was life, man.
Yeah.
When weddings started to go the way of disc jockey or DJs, I guess they don't spin discs necessarily, but man, that was so sad to me. Like I said I will never have a DJ at my wedding. Like we're getting a live band, and it's in Nashville. You can't swing a dead cat without finding a band. But there's a lot of places in the country where live music is there's a dearth. Like it's hard to find to
Hmm.
just to book a wedding band, someone to do covers and rock and roll or
Yeah.
some R&B, all the old standards for weddings.
Right. Yeah. Where I'm at, I'm in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and there's not a lot of music around here that I found anyway. We
So you
have
stand out when you go to the grocery store, don't you?
with the tattoos. Yeah, those tattoos helped me at the grocery store as well.
The tats and the hair. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the hair not so much anymore,
Yeah. At least you have hair, Joe.
but yeah. So I mean, rock music around here is it's not too bad. You do you get a chance to get out where you are since there is so many bands and clubs, and you go see live music still?
No, not anymore. If one of my friends blows through town, we'll go see them. But
Mhm.
man, downtown is such a mess. It's just crowded. Nashville has probably in the last 7 or 8 years exploded to the point that locals dislike it.
Yeah.
But it's the epicenter. It's the bachelorette party center of the universe. So if you want to listen to drunk 20 something screaming and dressing like they think we dress here in Nashville, which is like cut off jean shorts, cowboy boots, and a
Right.
cowboy hat.
Right. Right.
I
Right.
don't know where they get that idea, but every one of them comes dressed like that. But
I
it's
mean,
a
clearly you're
congested
not
mess.
dressed like that.
No, not today. Today
Yeah.
I'm dressed like a hobo because, as what the listeners don't know is you and I were having some technical issues. I'm going to spread it out and bring you into this too, Joe. It
Thanks,
was
bud.
all me. I was
Thanks,
having
bud.
issues and I was out of the shower and Joe was tapping his watch and I'm like, I got to get this straightened out. So no, I'm dressed like a bum.
You're dressed perfect for the show. All right. So you mentioned that you have a few books out, and you've got a few coming up. Now, I know you have some coming up with a buddy of mine, Pete Evick,
Oh,
right?
is he a buddy of yours?
Yeah, yeah, Pete's a buddy.
Love
I
me
call him
some
a
Pete
buddy.
Evick.
Yeah. Um, and then I heard you mention there was some other ones that you mentioned. I don't know which ones you're doing that you haven't mentioned. I'm just going off what I've heard you talk about.
Oh,
What
yeah.
was
So Ron Young's book from Little Caesar, his book will, God help me, Joe. We are going to get this thing out for the Christmas season if it kills me. It is so close to being done. But Pete, we have a mutual friend that calls him Petey Vic. But Pete Evick, his book should be next up. If you're listening, Pete, he's working on his edits right now. So I am
okay?
in a holding pattern waiting for him. That dude is the busiest guy in showbiz.
Isn't he?
Holy cow, is he busy?
Yeah.
He was nice enough though for my wife and my anniversary this year. He took us to he didn't take us, he let us come meet Bret Michaels at a
That's
show.
awesome.
And so we hung out backstage all day, and that was super awesome. Pete is one of the nicest guys in
He
rock and
is.
roll, in addition to being one of the busiest guys. But his should be next up. And I've we're close on one of the original members of the Guess Who, which
Okay.
you're old enough to remember them.
Hmm.
Probably none of your listeners are, but American Woman,
Yeah.
the Guess
Mm.
Who. Only one guy has been in the band since day one, and he's been in the band. Figure this out. You're a musician. He has been in the Guess Who for 60 years.
60 years.
60 years.
Wow.
So his book, he's had some health problems recently, and I need him to get better so we can finish because we're pretty close too. But
Mm.
you're in a band 60 years, you're no spring chicken. So he's
Yeah.
fighting it, and we'll get that thing done and out. And man, that's quite a ride too, a 60-year career.
That's got to be a big book.
It's really not, believe it or not,
No.
but there's his book is different than Randy Bachman's or Burton Cummings. He's got a little different point of view on what happened to the Guess Who and why they imploded basically and broke up almost at the peak of their power. Like the
Mm.
Guess Who was still commercially viable. And anyway, you can read all about it in his book.
I will. So when these, who publishes these books? Like, do you put them out, or do you have a company
Yeah, I
that?
started a publishing company too
Okay.
because I don't have enough
Might
to
as
do,
well.
Joe. You understand? I was thinking, what can I do in the 4 minutes I have free this month?
Right. Right.
So there's with I mentioned Cher Ross from Vixen. She actually we got her two separate publishing deals because she's a unicorn. Vixen is the only girl band that went platinum from the Sunset Strip era. If I laid that out correctly.
Was there more
So
girl bands?
she what?
Was there more girl bands?
Uh man, I can't
I
name
don't know.
one. There were
Anyway,
a
I'm
few.
sorry.
Well, that's a great. Well, that sort of is the point, right? That was a very male-dominated genre
Hmm.
industry, right? So anyway, neither of the publishing deals came close to what we could make by self-publishing the book.
Mm.
And so I think using that, she was one of my earlier books, using that as a template, I thought, unless I'm writing Axl Rose's book and he'll get $1 million advance. I don't even know if he's written a book, but he'll
Yeah.
easily get $1 million up front from Simon and Schuster or whoever he decides to go with. All of my people will get maybe 5 grand up front and never recoup. And I'm like,
Mm.
we can do a lot better than that, just self-publishing and using your platform. All of
Mm.
these rock stars have audiences. Cher is no
Sure.
longer touring with Vixen, but she's got a social media platform. Um, Troy negotiated in his leaving Tesla that his book will be promoted on their website and all of their platforms.
Awesome.
So the point is that it doesn't pay for people at my level. That sounded condescending. I didn't mean it to be. But these aren't Axl Rose or Mick Jagger or John Bon Jovi. Like they're in Kicks, they're in Vixen. Like I can do a lot better for them than a publishing deal could from a standard publisher.
Yeah. I guess that's almost the same as music, though, in a way, in that regards, as distribution and, you know.
Yeah, but man, I tell you what, I see there is so much hustle that they have to do just to keep pushing the new music. I know Autograph just came out with a new album or a new CD, and Simon Daniels is doing the circuit of all of us guys. Like we'll
Mm.
get a piece of them. I remember Bill Leverty from Firehouse when he put out his single, or I think he put out a full album or an EP. But man, he
Yeah.
was posting every day,
Yeah.
every day, every day. And I think, God, that is so much work. And I remember talking. I feel like watch your feet. I'm dropping names here. But I was talking to Jason Beeler about when he and Jeff Scott Soto put out stuff, and Jason has put out stuff with the Von Bielski Orchestra. And I said to him, he was on Eddie Trunk, and I called him and I said, how did that work? Like 1 minute of backstory, and I'll finish that sentence.
Mm.
When I was shopping Troy, this book around. We met with a publisher, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Can you get on Eddie Trunk?" So Eddie
Really?
Trunk and Trunk Nation apparently has a pretty good audience base. So I called Jason and I said, "You just promoted your album on Eddie Trunk. Did it work? Like, have you noticed a spike?" And his answer was, "Nah, man, no one wants to buy music or books anymore these days. Like, nobody wants to pay for it,
Sure.
ostensibly."
Sure.
So it sounds like even the days of promotion on big shows, and I don't even know if going on Rogan moves as much product as you
Hmm.
hope it does anymore. But I can't remember your original question. But
I can't
man, I
either.
can't remember your original question. The artist, you said music is sort of like
Oh, yeah, it
publishing.
was similar.
They
Yeah.
have to
Hmm.
hustle.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
man, they hustle. And I don't know how much return they get for that hustle, but I know I always feel bad for them because I'm
Mm.
like, dude, that is so much work.
That's a tough industry. Really is.
And it's a labor of love. The problem is with our generation of rockers, like it's Brett Michaels, when he goes out on his own, he's put out 4 or 5 albums solo. He doesn't sing a single song off of any of them. He sings
Yeah.
Poison
Oh boy.
songs.
That's what
That's
people
what the
want to hear.
fans want to hear. So that's what Pete Evick plays is Poison songs when he's on the road with Brett.
Hmm.
And if you put out a new album, it's almost a vanity project. You'll probably recoup if you do it cheap, that enough people will buy it. But for the most part, people want to hear the standards.
Yeah. 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 Well, awesome, man. Where can people get these books? Are these all still available? Like the
There
ones you've
are,
already done?
I've Ron Young's book, God Help Me, Joe, will be out by Christmas. It'll be on Amazon. The other rock star book that I've got out is with Sandy Gennaro, who was in Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. He was in Cyndi Lauper's band. He was also in Bo Diddley's band when Bo passed away. Like he played
Oh, wow.
Bo Diddley's very last show with him. He's played with Pat Travers, he's played with the Monkees, but we've got a book out called Beat the Odds, and that can be found on Amazon. The audio book dropped. We're recording this on Thursday. The audio book dropped Tuesday, but it's not in anybody's uh, library. Nobody has it in stock yet. And
Okay.
according to our distributor, it can take up to 30 days for the audiobooks to show up in all of the audio platforms, all of the sellers. So
Gotcha.
Sandy Gennaro is the one that I've got out. And I'll probably have 3, maybe 4 more out in 2023. And that's not including Ron Young's, who will be out by Christmas.
Awesome. Awesome. And then people, if they want to hear your podcast, the commute is audio only, right? There's no video there?
Right. It makes
Okay.
it easier. And my goal there was for people to, and it started without Rockstar, just normal people. Like they don't
Sure.
want to do this kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have children, Joe. My
Yeah.
God. So
I'm
even with
surprised.
the
I'm
Rockstar,
surprised mine haven't barged in yet.
well, we take it as it comes, man.
Yeah.
But even with the rock stars, like they want to get duded up and pretty, and for all the video ones. And for me, it's simple. They can be sitting in the back of a tour bus and just record with me. I want to make it as easy as possible for people to be on the show.
I see. I see. Yeah. This show here actually started audio only, and then I don't know why I moved it into video. Maybe I thought it
Yeah,
would
you
be.
do. Why'd you move it into
I
video?
don't
I'm
know. Maybe
curious.
I might have thought it might have been fun. I don't know. But
Has
it's a
it
lot
been
more work.
well, as is evidenced by tonight with you and me? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, but and then so Wrong and Wronger is on YouTube because I watch those. And then
Wrong and Wrongers
what
on
about
YouTube.
10 minutes to save your marriage?
10 minutes is an audio only. And so it's
Okay.
on all the platforms that audio podcasts are on.
Sure.
That one got picked up by iHeartRadio. So we were kind of happy about that. If you have the iHeartRadio app, you can find us on that one.
Okay. Okay. Awesome, Steve. I appreciate you taking the time. I know we've been trying to get this arranged for a while, and I'm glad we finally did it.
You're a busy man, and I'm
You're
a man
busier than
who
me.
goes to bed early. That's not a good combination. So thank you
Right,
for adjusting
right.
your schedule to accommodate.
No worries, man. It was a blast. I appreciate it. All right, buddy.